Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hi everybody, Tom Woods here. It's episode 2714 of The Tom Woods Show, and I'm glad to welcome back Skot Sheller to the show, who has written extensively on particularly the topic we're talking about today, which is Javier Milei, who is president of Argentina, and he's probably attracted more attention from libertarians than any world leader I can think of ever, certainly in my lifetime. Favorable attention, that is to say. Highly unusual, so doubly unusual. Skot is a member of the Free State Project, which of course we all know is that wonderful organization aiming to make New Hampshire free, to give us one outpost, at least in the United States, that we can flee to. He's founder also of the Shell Clubhouse. Talk a little bit about that later. Well, let's talk about this interesting character, Javier Milei, but specifically also what's been going on with him lately, because there have been obviously he's been in the news for a number of reasons, and libertarians, I would say, probably are still generally in favor of him, but there are some who have been concerned about this thing or the other that he's been doing. So I want to talk about this stuff. So I thank you, Skot, for coming back on here and sharing your knowledge.
It's a pleasure, Tom.
All right, let's start with the basics before we get into some of the more recent stuff. First of all, who is this guy in the sense of biographical information, but also what's his basic philosophy that would cause some people to cheer and others to be fearful, let's say?
Yeah, so Javier Milei is an economist in Argentina. He was an economist for many years and became political during the COVID lockdowns. So he was on their airways, was a really prominent pundit and podcaster. But during the lockdowns, he was so outraged by Argentina's really horrible lockdowns that he decided to run for office in 2021 and was elected to their Congress, their House of Deputies, which is similar to the U.S. Congress. He then runs for president in 2023, 2 years later, and his party, La Libertad Avanza, was established in 2021, which is essentially the Libertarian Party in Argentina. So he wins unexpectedly in 2021, runs for president in 2023 during one of the worst financial crisis or economic crisis in Argentina history, and ends up winning the presidency after a runoff. During his his ideology, which is very interesting, is he calls himself an anarcho-capitalist. This is the guy that his all-time hero is Murray Rothbard. He really loves people like Bob Murphy and has orientated his style and his knowledge of how government works from anarcho-capitalism. Now, as president, he calls himself a minarchist, just because he knows that given the political constraints, the political constraints, and just the reality of it, you can't govern directly as an anarcho-capitalist. So he's, as president, has governed and calls himself a minarchist, practically. But theoretically, he's an anarcho-capitalist, and his presidency has been reducing the size of the state and trying to, according to him, make it the freest country in the world.
I always thought that was strange that he was able to get elected when he has, at least in the past, described himself as an anarcho-capitalist. It seems like the easiest thing in the world would be to ridicule him for this, and to every time he opens his mouth to say, well, what do you think, we should privatize the military and scare people? That's what they do in the U.S. They would just try to scare everybody to death by taking his most controversial views that would take forever to explain and criticizing them in 2 sentences. It's amazing to me that he somehow got around that.
Well, I don't think Argentinians really knew what an anarcho-capitalist was.
Okay, well, good for them, because it would have been a problem.
And in 2023, the economic crisis was just profound. And there was absolutely no hope for the country. And if you follow his election, as I did, Tom, he was the only one talking anything reasonable of any of the candidates. His main opponent, the Kirchnerists, was denying that there was even an economic crisis. Argentina in 2023 had 211% inflation. It had exhausted all of its reserves. We'll get into all this. And the president said he wanted to cure inflation with a central bank digital. Not his opponent said he wanted to cure inflation with a central bank digital currency, and that the unemployment rate's only 6.2%. There was absolutely almost no talk of any reasonable economic policy. When you watch the debates in 2023, it was like there wasn't even an economic crisis. Besides Milei, that's his whole argument. His whole campaign was purely on how he's going to fix the economy, and specifically on inflation. His opponents had no clue on how to tackle inflation. The center-right opponent, Patricia Bullrich, who ended up in his government, wanted to attack the unions and increase security in the country. But Milei also wanted to do those things. And she said nothing about inflation. She had no idea how to attack inflation. So you had this one guy who ran just an incredible campaign, Tom, and who had the youth on his side. He galvanized the youth in the country, and they, just like Ron Paul when he was running, they acted with such grassroots enthusiasm and passion that it really projected him to the finish line. And it's important to note that Milei didn't win in the first round. So Milei actually lost in the first round of the election. He only got 30% of the vote. His Peronist, socialist, creep Massa won. He got 37% of the vote. So it knocked out the center-right. So the Libertarian got second. The center-right candidate wasn't that great, in my opinion. And so it knocked out the center-right, and it was just Milei and this guy who's the economic minister of the country, as the country was just falling apart, as the inflation was going crazy, as the dollar reserves were draining, and as the shortages were everywhere with price controls, and the country was in a severe recession. So you had that, and then Milei, and the young people essentially convinced their father and their grandparents to vote Milei, because 70% of them love him. So that's basically what happened. Is he won? He was able to get second, and he won the runoff.
Now, some people, like, for example, Barry Manilow, the singer, he maxed out in his donations to Ron Paul back in, I think it was 2008. Most people don't know that. I think he went on to vote for Obama because, of course, they all do. But when he was asked about it, why did you donate the maximum amount to Ron Paul? He said, I agree with almost everything he says, just like that. And so I thought, I like this guy more than I thought I did. So maybe he put his money where his mouth was. But I think other people, like when I see how many people went from Ron Paul, there were some who went over to Bernie Sanders. And that makes me wonder, why did you vote for Ron Paul? It's not couldn't be because you went through his whole list of positions and then you decided you're going to vote for him. There must have been something. Maybe it was he was sticking it to the plutocrats or something. Maybe there was something that they thought he represented that they voted for. Well, with Milei, as you say, in Argentina, people don't know what anarcho-capitalism is necessarily, so they're not necessarily voting for that. What do you think a vote for Milei? So in other words, a vote for Ron Paul could mean I hated the Iraq War and people need to pay for that. I can't let that go. Somebody needs to pay. So I'm going to cast my vote for Ron Paul. It could mean that. Could be a whole bunch of things. It could be Ron Paul's the only person I've ever even heard of in politics who believes in medical freedom. So I'm going to vote for him for that. But in Argentina, what do you think a vote for Milei means if it doesn't mean full ideological support for libertarianism? What do you think he represents, in other words, to the average Milei voter?
Well, that's a good question. A vote for Milei, and Argentinians have had 80 years of high inflation, Tom. Like the lowest inflation has been in the last 25 years is like 25%. That's the lowest. And they've had 80 years of high inflation. They've had multiple years of 100% inflation. And so the Argentinians have just kind of learned that this whole populist, Peronist governing strategy doesn't work. This sort of national socialism that they've had for 80 years. And Argentina was a rich country. You've seen Buenos Aires. It's an unbelievably beautiful city. And all of them are like that. They're all, I've been to Rosario, I've been to several of their cities. They're all beautiful, all spectacular, but they're all kind of decaying. And so this country went from this really wealthy country with abundant natural resources in mining. They have the most lithium reserves. They have tremendous oil reserves. They have fertile land, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yet it has just been mired in financial crisis after financial crisis. 2001, they had a severe financial crisis. 1989. So I think Argentinians have just learned that this strategy of spending more than you take in taxes, of printing money, just doesn't work. And they just needed somebody to tell them exactly what was happening. And so there was people that got Milei. There's people that understood Milei, and that was about 30-something% of the country. And then there were people that just hated the Kirchnerist Peronists. And keep in mind, the Christina Kirchner is currently in jail because she stole billions of dollars and was caught red-handed. So that's Milei's opponents, are these very corrupt political people. So you have the Milei people, and then you have the people that just hate the Kirchnerist, Peronist, socialist, whatever you call them, populist. And so that coalition, once he made it to the runoff, got him the win.
Hey gang, you and I are about to run an experiment. Let's see if my old colleague Bob Murphy, who used to co-host the Contra Krugman podcast with me, you remember that show? Let's see if he listens to the Tom Woods Show. I'm about to tell you what he's getting from me for Christmas. So if he acts completely surprised, I'll know, sadly, that he's not a listener. Sniff, sniff. So many of us already have so much stuff. We just don't need more stuff. That's why delicious steaks are such a perfect gift. So I've been using my own coupon code WOODS at omahasteaks.com and sending them Omaha Steaks. The great Ben Settle, you should know who he is, got them from me. So did our friend Stefan Kinsella. So did Chris Williams, who does the audio for this show, and so on. So I know I'm getting 50% off, and then with code WOODS, I'm able to take another $35 off. So it's both a great deal and a great gift idea. Omaha Steaks is a family-owned company with over 100 years of expertise in the meat industry. They deliver an exclusive lineup of USDA-certified tender steaks, and their fan-favorite filet mignons have achieved the distinction of USDA-certified very tender. But in addition to steaks, they also carry mouth-watering burgers, chicken, pork, seafood, cozy and convenient comfort meals, and delectable desserts. Every bite is backed by their 100% guarantee, and every steak is perfectly aged to maximize tenderness and hand-cut by master butchers in America's heartland. Save big on gourmet gifts and more holiday favorites with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during their Sizzle All the Way sale. And for an extra $35 off, use promo code WOODS at checkout. Terms apply. See site for details. That's omahasteaks.com, code WOODS. Murphy, you better be listening. I think if you were to try to say, well, he's too extreme. You can't listen to him. That still kind of works in the U.S. But based on what you're describing in terms of the inflation problem, I would think that would be less effective in Argentina, because I would think, if by now you're not willing to say, I'm willing to give anybody a try at this point, how could they be any worse? What have I got to lose? Everybody else I choose gives me nothing but the same old disaster. Maybe the guy who is quote unquote extreme might be just the person to shake things up. So I think that kind of line of argument that he might have encountered otherwise might have fallen flat in this day and age.
Yeah, that's right. And the center right did win an election in 2015 to 2000, and they totally screwed it up. They didn't make any sort of adjustments for the first 3 years, and then as things got dire, they made their adjustments in the fourth year, in an election year, and as a result, they got slaughtered in the elections, and the socialist Kirchnerist won again. So that was another aspect to all this, is the center right had disgraced itself in Argentina, had shown itself to be ineffective. So that's why another reason why people wanted something new. We're looking for something new.
All right. So obviously what we want to do is talk about what's happened since he took office. And of course, we want to talk about elections that have taken place. We want to, and what we should make of that, and so on. But can you say something about his track record? Because there are some libertarians who say he's a con man. He hasn't really accomplished much of anything. He's been demanding a bailout from the U.S., stuff like that. What do you say to that? Like, what is a realistic way of assessing what the consequences of his policies have been?
Well, Milei entered with a 5% of GDP deficit. Milei entered with the central bank doubling the money supply every month. Okay, every month. And they were doing this because of this monetary policy liability. And Milei entered with no cash reserves whatsoever to pay any debt. So what Milei did was he slashed government spending. They cut government spending 30%. It's actually close to 40%, but there was a lot of extra government spending for the election. So he cut government spending 30-40% in 1 month. And he did this by cutting public works entirely, by cutting the amount of ministries in half and reducing the employees in half, by cutting virtually every contract he could, by cutting as much government workers as he could, by closing everything that was open by decree, which was a lot of things. If they were open by decree, he closed them by decree. And when you have 80 years, essentially, more or less, of one-party rule, the strength of the government, the power they give the federal government's enormous, and Milei used that to actually reverse. So he cut government spectacularly, and it was not popular with the political elite in Argentina at all. He also did a lot of deregulations. He used the executive order to massively deregulate the economy. Famously, he deregulated the national rent control, which doubled the supply of rents, or the supply of rents, and brought down prices. But he did that in a lot of different things. And eventually, the government has been so opposed to him. He entered with only 15% of the House of Deputies and 10% of the Senate, which was his party, La Libertad Avanza. And especially in the Senate, majority of the opposition. And so he eventually, despite a very hostile Congress, which got even more hostile toward the end of his last 2 years, he got his legislation passed, and he's been privatizing government businesses. He's also made one of the reasons why the deficit, he's had a surplus since January of 2024. Like I said, they had a 5% deficit. And not only he's got a surplus, plus he pays all the financing costs. That's what I've heard, that people say, oh, he's not paying the financing costs. No, they publish this every month. He pays the financing cost for the debt every month too. So they have the budget surplus, and then the real surplus is much lower after paying the financing cost. But there's always been a surplus. And so he's run a balanced budget. He cut money printing entirely once he got rid of that liability, and it took about 6 months to do that, because it was an enormous liability. And if they didn't do it correctly, if they allowed all that liability to mature, basically it would have caused a hyperinflation in the economy. So he had to kind of whittle it down before he took it off the balance sheet and put it on the treasury. So he cut money printing entirely. And the result is the economy went from, complete disaster, to this year they have over 5% growth. And the economy left the recession by 2024. So, and this is with a 30% cut in government spending. And with the inheritance of a capital controls, which Milei inherited, and no dollar reserves and no international financing because the country risk was so high. So what he's done is kind of, it really is kind of a miracle, especially the way he's navigated the really fragmented and weak government, the Congress.
Well, that's a question, because most of us here don't know anything about the composition of the government in Argentina or how it works or anything like that. But what kind of support did he have at the beginning, outside of his immediate circle? I mean, in the governing body, like where, what can we say something about numbers? Like how many of these people are supporters of his, or I would say with most places you have hardcore of support, you have a hardcore that's opposed, and you have a section that could be persuaded one way or the other if it's in their interests.
Yeah, so remember his party was started in 2021. And in 2021, only 2 of them got elected, him and his vice president. So in 2023, they did pretty well. But like I said, he lost in that election, and it was a pretty small minority. So Argentina has a very similar system in composition to the U.S. They have a Senate and like a House of Representatives. The Senate has 72. The House has 257. And his party had 38 in the House, so about 15%, and 6 in the Senate, so a little bit less than 10% in the Senate. He had he had some more support than that, though, because the center-right party, which sided with his party most of the time. So the center-right pro-party, I think of them as the Republicans. They're not libertarians, but they really hate the Kirchnerists. And in a lot of ways, they will agree with the La Libertad Avanza Libertarian Party. And they helped Milei a lot early on and have generally been on his side. And Milei, it took Milei 6 months, almost 7 months, to pass any legislation at all. And this is unusual in Argentina, because usually they pass legislation for a new president within the first month. So the Congress kept denying any sort of legislation passed. And essentially what happened is Milei got so popular because things were getting better without any legislation getting passed. And eventually some of the people sort of that weren't like you said, totally opposite of Milei, decided to vote for Milei get some of his things passed. Now, it wasn't as big as he would want, right? It wasn't as much as he would want. It was much limited to what he would prefer, but it allowed him to cut more government. It gave him a whole year to do a bunch of deregulations, and it allowed him to privatize industries and some stuff and enact investment regimes that have been really 30-year investment regimes that allow stability if you want to invest in Argentina. So that has been a huge benefit for them too. So while he didn't get everything he wanted, they really need, and I'm sure we'll get into this, they really need labor and tax reform desperately bad. They wouldn't allow that to be passed, but it still was good enough to really get the economy better and more progressed. So the fact that he got that passed was quite kind of amazing. But in recent times, he's lost a little bit of support on the center right, on the periphery. A few people here and there that haven't voted for him, and the Congress has, and this started to lead to some of the troubles that Milei had recently. Started to pass bills that were reckless and were very reckless spending bills, and we can get into that. And then when Milei vetoed them, they overrode his veto. And they started to override his executive orders. So he, at that point in time, closer to this election, in our summer months, the Congress started to oppose Milei like by 2/3, and that's why he really needed a good election. And so,
so what happens with this provincial election in Buenos Aires?
Yeah, so the governor of Buenos Aires is one of these Kirchnerist socialists, and he decided because he thought it would benefit him to do the provincial elections. This is like a state election, not a national election, but a state election in the United States, like when we have our state elections in New Hampshire, for example. He did it on a separate day than the national elections. And why these were important was because while the economy was doing much better, the real threat is if the austerity, if Milei's libertarian program was going to be accepted by the people, or if the Peronists were going to come back in power.
And by the way, we use that term a lot, but what does that mean?
So the Peronist, Peronist is a political movement named after a populist that got elected in the 1940s. He was originally in the military dictatorship, and then when they returned to democracy, Juan Perón got elected in 1946, and he became this cult of personality. He was an awful president. He was a fascist. His hero was actually Benito Mussolini, and he empowered the state to really wreck the economy. And the thing that really, I think, was the downfall of Argentina is he changed the constitution to guarantee housing and food and housing and food and healthcare in the constitution, so that the government has to provide these things. And he used very heavy-handed tactics to increase his political power, and he really looked a lot like how Benito Mussolini used the the state to increase his political power. And although he was always a disaster when he was president, the average Argentinian liked his personality, liked him. He had his wife, Evita Peron, was extremely famous, and she died young at 33. She's a beautiful, like rags to riches woman. She became rich because she married Peron, not because, but and so his wife Evita was very famous. You probably saw her face on one of the buildings in Buenos Aires, Tom, and so he just had this huge cult of personality, and ever since then, all of the elected officials and virtually every politician has been a Peronist in one way or another. And he was a leftist populist. He was also a hardcore like nationalist. So national socialism is true. They unionized like the whole country. They nationalized a lot of the industries. He would spend way more than he earned in taxes on populist things to help him politically. And this has just been a constant theme where this populism keeps returning. And up until Milei, even the center-right president of 8 years ago, they've all been Peronist of one way, one sort or not. He's their Abraham Lincoln. He's their most popular president, and his propaganda and everything that he did still endures to this day. And in the last 25 years, there was a really bad Peronist that got elected that was more Marxist than even the previous Peronists, and that was the Kirchners. And they weaponized the state to enhance their power. 16 of the last 20 years were under their rule, and they paid the journalists. They nationalized media outlets. They would use the treasury for their own events, political events, and they're the ones that really destroyed the country. And that was the Christina Kirchner who is in jail now because she stole billions of dollars. But so the last 25 years were really, really bad, and it revived the legacy of Peron.
Hey, everybody, when the Woods family's health insurance premium hit $3,000 a month, we said no more. We are seceding from this system effective immediately. Well, this open enrollment, when health insurance companies hope you'll blindly sign up again for overpriced premiums and confusing fine print, I hope you'll join us. Crowd Health is the health insurance alternative. We're talking health care for under $100. You get access to a team of health bill negotiators, get access to low-cost prescription and lab testing tools, as well as a database of low-cost, high-quality doctors vetted by Crowd Health. What if something major happens? You pay the first $500, then the Crowd steps in to help fund the rest. The system is betting you'll stay stuck in the same overpriced, overcomplicated mess. And this year, it's even more complicated because most of the ACA subsidies expire, which means your prices are going sky high. Well, this open enrollment, take your power back. Join Crowd Health to get started today for $99 for your first 3 months using code WOODS at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com, code WOODS. Crowd Health is not insurance. Opt out. Take your power back. This is how we win. joincrowdhealth.com. Everyone, if you're like me, you've been watching the Fed inflate the dollar into oblivion while politicians bungle trade policy and rack up historic amounts of debt. And you're wondering how to protect what you've worked so hard to build. That's why I want to talk to you about Monetary Metals, a company doing something truly revolutionary with gold. We all know gold is a safe haven asset, but let's face it, most gold just sits there in a vault, not doing much. It holds its value over time, but it doesn't grow. What if I told you there's a way to not only own physical gold, but also earn a yield on it, paid in gold, every single month? That's exactly what I do with Monetary Metals. I lease my gold with them and earn an annual yield around 4% in gold, not in paper currency. I keep my ounces, and every month I get more. Think about it. You still benefit from any price appreciation, like what we've been seeing in 2025, with gold pushing past all-time highs, and you also get paid more ounces of gold along the way. That's what makes this model so exciting. It's a genuine breakthrough. For the first time in decades, gold is functioning as a yield-bearing asset, just like in the classical gold standard days. The Fed can print dollars, they can't print gold. It's time to start growing your wealth in ounces, not just hoping for the best with fiat. Go to monetary-metals.com/woods to learn more and see how you can start earning a gold income too. That's monetary-metals.com/woods. I think I distracted you by asking you that because you had a lot to say about it. But let's go back. Because I just saw I saw a clip. What was it? 2 weeks ago? Maybe it was more recently than that. After elections where Milei did very well, and he runs outdoors and greets a whole lot of supporters, high-fiving them running down the street. I'm sure you saw that. But this Buenos Aires election did not go quite so well, and it had real consequences.
Yeah, so it had really bad consequences because the Peronists were able to really galvanize and organize, and they had a really good ground game. And Milei's party was hoping to tie or win, and they ended up losing by 14 points. They got slaughtered. Milei's campaign was really kind of stale. It was more very conservative, more like a typical campaign. And I think that played into part in why they lost so bad. But this caused just major shockwaves because Argentina got rid of capital controls this year and started to free float their currency, and which was a great win for economic liberalism, economic freedom in the country. But the problem is there is a problem of fear of floating. And this is a problem when you have a country that switches from a populist country to a populist government to a non-populist government to a populist government, where the elections have tremendous anxiety. And it causes a lot of what they call regime uncertainty. So a lot of the economic progress that Milei was doing and was basically ruined by this election because when Milei lost by 14%, he got slaughtered. I mean, he almost won Buenos Aires in province in the election, and Buenos Aires province has about a third of the population of the country. So he got slaughtered by 14 points in the biggest, most populated province in the country, and it really made it seem like that his revolution and that the people were not dealing or didn't support the austerity. And this caused the peso to depreciate. This caused the stock market to crash. This caused Argentina bonds to crash.
And by the way, I wonder how much of this is because it was so unexpected that the polls had not shown that this was supposed to happen.
No, the polls were showing that Milei was going to tie, and the whole time that Milei was the whole time that Milei has been president, his polling very well, and his party has been polling very well. So it was very surprising, and this caused, just tremendous damage in the markets. And after that, the polling, and I think that the polling was lying after that, but the polling all said that Milei was going to lose the next election. So
if the polling were inaccurate, was the purpose of that to demoralize him?
I think so. I think that was the case because if you look at the betting markets, which I like to look at, the betting markets all had Milei generally winning. And there was something interesting that happened after that election. Milei fired everybody most people in his, fired and demoted everybody in the campaign that was running his national campaign. And he put this young person in charge, Santiago Caputo, and he represents the young people. He represents the forces of heaven, which is Milei, what Milei calls them. They're the young people that really love him. And his campaign overnight improved dramatically. It got, I posted about it on X like a day or two later. I was like, wow, this campaign just looks so much better. And it just got way more exciting. The young people got energized again. And Milei started campaigning in a way that was even more intense than he campaigned in 2023. He started to go to these cities, and he would just announce that he was there. And I think he was afraid of assassination. This was after Charlie Kirk was killed, and he would just come with his caravan into a city, and they would just be surrounded by like 10,000 people. And he would get out and get on his megaphone and start giving these speeches. And the visuals were just incredible. They were just incredible. And so I looked at the campaign. I was like, wow, this campaign is incredible. It's exciting. It's so much different. And I thought that his party was going to win just from that. And however, the economy, the peso was on the verge of a crisis. And it has to involve with this free floating currency, and the fear of the Peronists coming back, and they were using this. They were his opposition was celebrating this as like they won the Super Bowl. Every time the stock market got crashed, every time the peso would depreciate to the dollar, it was a celebration for them. And they would blame Milei, but it was really the fear of them why everything was crashing. And so as Milei's campaign went on, let's go back a little bit, and we'll talk about. Do you want to talk about the financial crisis and during that time before the
election?
Yeah. So let's go back just a little bit. In 2023 was there was a huge currency crisis, and the peso went from like $200 at the beginning of 2023 to $1,200 to $1 at the end. So it depreciated tremendously. And to fight that, the government sold all of their dollars to try to fight this. The government would buy pesos and sell their dollars. And so they had no dollars whatsoever. And the international community, and the crisis was so bad, there was nobody in the international community that would lend to Argentina. And Argentina had $140 billion of external debt. And a lot of that external debt was coming due in 2025 and in 2026. So Milei's strategy was to, one, increase economic growth, get a surplus, and basically increase the chances to allow him to renew the debt. So that was actually happening in 2025, and this is what the United States does. This is what Canada does. They don't actually pay the debt. We don't actually pay $38 trillion in debt. What we do is we sell new debt to pay for the old debt. And Milei was actually doing this in 2025 because he was running budget surpluses, because the economic growth was getting better, and the economy was stabilizing. He had lowered the country risk so much that he was actually renewing the debt on international markets. He did it twice that year, auctioning off debt. One better, a little bit better than the other, but that was what he was doing. But after this election, after the Peronists won, there was absolutely nobody that would lend to Argentina. There was no way to renew this debt. And what happened was, and like I said, a lot of this debt was coming due at the end of the year and early into 2026. So Milei had no way to really pay this debt. And so this is why they went to the United States and they asked for a swap. And the United States looked at this, and at that time, the peso was battered. It was around 1,300 pesos to $1, and it had depreciated to the point it was almost 1,600 pesos to $1. And their bonds and everything else were doing terrible. And so the U.S. knew that if Milei won, that this would actually be a really good deal. So what they did is they exchanged pesos with dollars. It wasn't exactly a bailout like everybody says. The United States has done swaps with Mexico, with Canada, with Japan, with the EU, with Switzerland, with there's a bunch of other countries that they do swaps. It's not very uncommon. Argentina actually has a swap with China. It's something countries do when another country has lower liquidity. And the United States gave Argentina a $20 billion swap. Now, they really haven't given them that much. Just an article came out, it's been $5 billion or something recently. They haven't given the full amount. But they gave Argentina this $20 billion swap, or said they would. And they bought pesos. They swap pesos with dollars. So the U.S. actually got something in return. They also bought some Argentina debt, treasuries, and this stabilized the currency. As Milei's campaign was turning around, getting more excited, Milei decided to make bridges with the center right again, which improved his chances in the election. And so the economy started to stabilize. His campaign got dramatically better. And during the national elections, remember the provincial election went very bad. Milei's party won in a landslide. And the polls were like, he's going to get 30%. He's going to lose the election. And the Peronists would get like 35%. But Milei got almost 41%. And the Peronists only got like 31%. And Milei's party won in a landslide. And as a result, everything in Argentina skyrocketed. Their stock market had the best day in the history of Argentina, and it's still been blowing up. Their bonds have blown up. The currency has strengthened tremendously. And what happened was this investment into Argentina actually made the United States a ton of money. So they made like a ton of money. So where the bonds made tons of money and the currency appreciated a lot, over 10%. So it wasn't a typical, usually bailouts, you don't make any money on it. And this one, the United States made quite a bit of money. So I believe it was worth it. And the new majority allows Milei to do what he really needs to do, which is labor and tax reform.
Well, all right. So from a pro-freedom perspective, would you say that this whole matter of the quote-unquote bailout was the least bad of a series of bad alternatives? How would you assess it? Would you say that, well, look, he was in an impossible situation. He's the best guy we're going to get. So if he needed a little bit of help, it should be given to him. Is that the kind of argument you would make, or is it a different kind of argument?
Well, from his perspective, all he did was get a new creditor and better terms. And so that actually lowered the amount they would actually have to pay. So it's sort of like the central bank of Japan or Korea or China buying U.S. debt. When you that so or renewing your debt or getting or what every country does all the time, they sell they like I said, they sell debt to pay for the old debt, and it wasn't really any different than that. Where it's just that the United States it's just that the United States was one of the only people that would buy the debt. So and of course it was risky. If Milei would have lost in the election, so all of that, it would have been a bad investment. But since Milei won, it was a very good investment. So there was risk involved with it. But from Argentina's perspective, it would have been basically the same as them renewing the debt and selling the debt to creditors. So this gave them a much better terms, and I think from their perspective, it's not much different than what they would have done anyways. From the U.S. perspective, I mean, the U.S. is a country that's so unlibertarian, and that it's like, how do you judge it? But I think that compared to what they usually do, which is like bomb people and spend money on foreign policy, this is more akin to what the Chinese do, which is make inroads with people and help them out financially in return for stuff. So I think that I would prefer that the United States did more of this than what they typically do, which is the foreign policy that we all disdain.
All right. Well, what are the issues with labor or with labor law in Argentina that would make that issue a priority for Milei?
Yeah, so they have national, like I said, the Peronists basically unionize the whole country, and they have national wage agreements that don't respect different regions or different industries. They don't discern between good productive workers and bad workers. And so these agreements are over 20 years old or older than that. And they really cripple many industries. Like with high minimum wages or areas that are unproductive. It's like having the minimum wage of Switzerland and Bolivia or something like that. Some areas of Argentina are wealthier, like Buenos Aires, and then some areas of Argentina are very unwealthy, like Chaco and Santiago del Estero. Yet they still have the same the national union agreements, and it makes the country very unproductive. And Milei wants to. Milei's a hardcore federalist, and that's one of the things that he's doing. And he wants to allow firms and regions to negotiate these terms instead of having it done by the federally, which is what they do now. And so he wants to basically decentralize the whole system and allow less productive areas to have agreements and firms that have unique labor requirements to have their own sort of agreements. And this is just a big step improvement of what they have. So this would be a major improvement as far as as their allowing more free market labor relations, which are bad, Tom. Only 6 million of the 45 million actually work in the formal sector. Over 50% work, 40 to 50% work in the informal sector in Argentina. So the labor laws are just so bad that you can't even hire anybody legally. You have to pay them under the table. And there's another problem with that is entrepreneurs have to pay about 34% in Social Security contributions for their labor in Argentina. And for example, the United States, it's only 14%. In industrialized countries, it's only about 20%. And in most Latin American countries, it's like 10%. But Argentina pays 34% in Social Security contributions. And so it's a tax hell for any entrepreneur. And this is why Milei wants to do the same thing, where he wants to allow the provinces to do their own tax regime and have tax competition. And so this is another part of his legislative strategy, and to make Argentina more competitive, and more competitive, and increase the economic growth.
Can you just put in perspective this more recent election and what the significance of it is? And was it anticipated that his people would have quite the victory that they had that night?
No, not at all. I wish I would have bet on this, Tom, because I thought they would win, just because I saw how dynamic and the campaign had become, and it was something like I'd never seen before. But the polls showed that he was going to lose the whole time, and the international polls said he was going to lose. I just didn't believe it the whole time. Like I said, his entire presidency, he's been popular. His party was doing well. I really thought that the Buenos Aires election was sort of an aberration, but the polling all was like, oh, Milei's party's gonna lose. They're only gonna get like 29%. And that's what the international media was saying. So, and there were the like I said, the governors always have opposed Milei more or less, and they had their own people running. And there was fear that they had created their own party that was more aligned with the governors, and the fear was that even in the provinces that Milei won in 2023 by huge margins, is that this new party they're called United Provinces, would actually beat Milei in Cordoba, where he got 74%. The polling was like, oh, this new party was going to beat his party in Cordoba and some of these other provinces. And it turned out to be the opposite. Milei slaughtered this United Province party. He won every province, even Buenos Aires. This is the most incredible thing, Tom. He lost Buenos Aires by 14 points in September. He won it. He improved by 14 points this time. It was an incredible turnaround. And a part of that was he got rid of a lot of the fraud with one ballot, but they had multiple ballots, and it caused a lot of fraud. And he did kind of what the United States did, and he made it one ballot. So he improved 14% in Buenos Aires and won Buenos Aires. A huge shock to everyone, because that is the most Peronist province. And he swept almost every province. He only lost like 3 or 4 provinces in the whole country. His party swept everything, and they got the most votes in every province, and they got 40%. Now you'd be like, "What? His own party only got 40%?" Well, in Argentina, they have it's a multi-party system. There are many parties. There are a lot of people that just run and get 1% in every. So you have like dozens and dozens of like small little parties that run. So getting 40% was actually the second best election result since the return of democracy in 1983. So his party did really well in the midterms, and it shocked everybody. It didn't shock me, but it shocked everybody in the world. And with this win is he gives his government a chance to actually pass the legislation we have been talking about, the labor and tax reform, and it'll prevent what was happening, the opposition to pass legislation that hurts him. So he'll be able to protect it, like his vetoes, for example, if they end up passing something bad. So it's a huge win for him, and if they can get this reform, we are talking an economic miracle in Argentina. Their economy is going to be absolutely rolling, and it actually already is. They've had record tourism within the last week. Their exports are breaking records. Their oil and their mining and their agriculture is doing really well. The only thing that's not doing as well is the industry in Argentina. And that's because a lot of it is protected by the Peronist government. So you have a lot of inefficient industries. And like I said, those labor laws and everything are so bad. So if he can get that, he can get the industry going. He can get the agriculture going. He can get lithium. They can be the Saudi Arabia of lithium. They have the most lithium deposits in the world. We're talking economic miracle here.
When I was in Argentina about a year ago, as a matter of fact, just slightly over a year ago right now, and we went down there. I mean, I'm sure I would have eventually gotten to Argentina, but we went down there in part because we were curious about what was going on. I mean, that's of all the countries in the world, we chose it at that moment because of Milei and all that, and we got to talking to people on the street about what they thought, and we found people were generally favorable. So, we had some people were skeptical but willing to give him a chance, and so that was kind of interesting. But I did talk to Doug Casey at that time, who's been a guest on this show, who, at least at that time, I don't know what his opinions are now, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he said that if Milei is able to continue as he had, then Argentina is going to, in a matter of years, be one of the most prosperous and freest countries in the world. So we can hope that, from his lips to God's ear, as they say.
Yeah, I think 7 to 10% economic growth is definitely within reach, and I really do. If they can pass these laws, I mean, he wants to make private property inviolable. He wants to continue to cut the spending to 25% of GDP. He wants to get the provincial spending under control. The provinces have not gone along with him on spending. A lot of them have increased spending as he's cut it. But that's starting to change. A lot of the provinces are starting to actually compete on taxes, lower taxes, and make themselves more viable. I think Doug Casey is right. I think it'll take time. I don't think they'll be the richest country in like 10 years or anything, but I think that they can quickly grow and become a respectable country pretty quickly, where it's not 35-50% poverty, so because he inherited 50% poverty, now it's only 30% poverty. I think the poverty is going to continue to decline very rapidly, and so I do think it has all the potential in the world if they can really rid the populism and the Peronism and continue what Milei is doing.
Scott, how do people follow you? Because you do write about this quite a bit.
Yeah, I've written on AIER. I'm writing an article on how Milei is still popular after cutting 30% of spending and stuff like that. And I've written for and I go by Bangershell11 on X. So follow me there. I've been retweeted by Milei 50 times. I've even been retweeted by Elon Musk.
How about that?
that was crazy. So I don't have like the biggest following, but I've had like 30 million views within the last year. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, not too shabby.
Yeah, it's wild. If you get retweeted by Milei, you really can get a lot of views, and he's retweeted me like 50 times. So, that's where you can follow me. I write, I do commentary on there, so I'll post my articles on there. Sometimes I do videos, and I do like breaking stories. Breaking news is generally how Milei retweets me. So stuff that I don't see in English, I will write. I will break news or whatever, so people know what's going on in Argentina.
Well, I'll also put that at tomwoods.com/2714, the show notes page. Skot, we appreciate the update. Very valuable. Thanks so much.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Tom.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And don't forget to join me on the best vacation ever. Check it out at tomwoodscruise.com. We'll see you next time.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.